Guys, I just wanted to do a little bit of a review on some of the math concepts that we've been having lately. The first thing that we've done in the past here, most recently, is dividing by fractions. And the secret to dividing by fractions is the second number you need to flip upside down. It's called inverting, and then you multiply. So if you have fraction divided by fraction, you invert or flip upside down the second fraction and then multiply. And then don't forget, the very first step in multiplying fractions is to see, can we simplify anything? Simplify first, because then you don't have to do as much reducing, okay? So simplifying up front helps you to not do quite as much reducing. So there's different kinds of fraction division. We can do a mixed number and divide it by a fraction. We can do a fraction and divide it by a whole number. And we can do a fraction divided by a mixed number. Or we can have a mixed number divided by a mixed number. But the secret is step number one: if you have a mixed number, change it to an improper fraction. If you have a whole number, you can make a whole number into a fraction. So we're doing a fraction divided by fraction. All right? So if you have a fraction divided by a mixed number, you change the mixed number to improper. And then you invert it, simplify if you can, and then multiply. So those are the quick steps. Let me do an example here for you, just a kind of a review. Let's have 2 2/3 divided by 5/6. So we have a mixed number divided by a fraction. So the very first thing we do is convert that mixed number into an improper fraction. 2 2/3 is 8/3. And then that's divided by 5/6. The next step is to invert 5/6. So we have 8/3 times 6/5. Then we simplify where we can. 3 goes into 6 2 times, and then 8 times 2 is 16. 1 times 5 is 16/5. And then we convert that back into a mixed number, and it'll be 3 1/5. You might want to pull out a pencil and paper and follow along with that if you could. That might help clarify that for you. Then yesterday we did comparing. This was a lesson on comparing. And the big thing that I posted a hint on the math class wall was that comparing is all about division. Okay? We use division to compare two numbers. And we want to find out how many times bigger one number is than a second number. And so we divide the biggest number by the smaller number, and that tells us how many times bigger. And the example that they give, one of the examples that they give in the book is 85 feet. How many times is that bigger than 5 feet? And so we take the big number and divide the small number into it. So 85 feet, and we divide 5 into it, and we find out 5 goes into 85 17 times. And so 85 is 17 times bigger than 5. And that's an example on page 237 in our textbook. Okay, so comparing is simply a division problem, guys. We want to know how many times the big number is than the small number. So we divide the small one into the big one. Simple problem, just a divide. So comparing is a divide. Keep that in mind. Then today we're going to talk about, or your video teacher will talk about, finding the part of a whole and finding a part of a whole. When you find a part of a whole, all you're doing is making a fraction. And so if we want to find out what part of a day, for instance, 1 hour would be, we need to say, well, we're talking 1 hour. and we're talking day. Well, day is 24 hours, right? So what part of 24 hours is 1 hour? And so we take the smaller number and we make a fraction by putting the small number on top of the big number. So 1 hour is 1 on top of 24. So that means 1 hour is 1/24th of a day. And that's how you do finding a part of a whole. You're making a fraction. So keep that in mind. An example that they give in the book is what part of a bigger number is 9 hours compared to 36 hours. And so what do? We take the small number, make a fraction by putting it on top of the big number, and we have 9 hours is what part of 36 hours? It's 9/36. Now, of course, I hope you remember that we can reduce that. 9/36 is 1/4. So we always reduce a fraction when it's necessary to do so. When we can reduce, we should. After we're done with our fraction problems, if we end up with an improper fraction as an answer, remember, we always take the improper fraction and make a mixed number out of it. Okay, so these are some hints of some things that we've done in the past recently, and some things yesterday, and some things that we're going to be talking about today in the video class on math. They're not too hard if you just remember how to do what you're doing. Okay, if we're comparing how big something is to another, you divide. Comparison is simply dividing. And if we're trying to find out what part something is, we make a fraction. So those are the two concepts that we're working with. By the way, there's a speed drill today, and so we are skipping every once in a while. We're skipping a lesson, so make sure you're doing the speed drill for the lesson that we're doing, unless in the class instructions I ask you to do a different speed drill, and then put the speed drills in the Friday packet. I think there was something with green legs back there for a minute, so I had to scrape it off. Anyway, put those speed drills when you finish the speed drills into the Friday packet. So, for instance, there's 4 speed drills on a page, and if we're on lesson 133 today, and the last speed drill on that sheet was 131, then that sheet's no longer usable, so put that in the Friday packet. And that's how we do that. Hey, thanks for paying attention. I appreciate this was a little longer review, but I wanted to go over some of the things that you've been seeing. Hopefully we're trying to get some of that confusion out of there. Thanks. If you have problems or questions, send me an email.